Music Talk brings you Cristina Vane, who is in Nashville to talk about her latest album, Make Myself Me Again. Inspired by the likes of R.L. Burnside and Charlie Patton, this Italian-born American puts her own spin on hill country blues. Cristina also shares her thoughts on the gun violence that seems to be tearing her adopted country apart.
Sometimes I lose, sometimes I win. I'm gonna make myself me again.
It's my going on fifth year in Nashville.
Okay.
So I'm sort of in that in-between place where it doesn't feel new anymore. But at the time that the record was written, I had sort of spent my first year in town getting out of town and kind of like recording the songs from the road that I had done that trip, before moving to Nashville, and my first album's all about that. And 4 years later, I feel like my second album reflects all the stuff that's happened since then, which seems natural, but it's a lot more inward maybe than the first album, which is more about traveling and new places and experiences. And this is sort of like back to what I know, which is, human emotion, human relationships, the weight of the changing world with the pandemic, moving to a place, finding yourself at any age, I guess, because I think
Right.
that it's like a never-ending quest is sort of what you start to learn around your 30s, and you're just like, oh God, it's there's this constant evolution thing happening. So yeah, so it's a lot about all that kind of just being a human life stuff.
Yep. Well, you had done some moving around: Italy, France, England, L.A., Nashville. So was that a process for you, or was it what caused all the movement, do you think?
I guess in a way, knowing that that I've done it before, that nothing out there is really that scary. I've lived on the East Coast, I've lived on the West Coast, I've lived in Europe, I've lived in the States, and that's by no means the whole world, but I've seen a lot of the rest of the world. And you sort of get used to your bubble after being in one place for a while, and you forget all the stuff that's out there, and that there's a totally valid and different way that you could be rearranging your life. If you went to live in Holland or something, you might be on a bicycle instead of in a car more, and things like that, where part of me just doesn't want to get stuck anywhere. But I didn't really want to leave Los Angeles. And so the other part of me really wants to be rooted somewhere. And that's what I've done in Nashville. I own a home here, and I plan to be here for a while. I have a cat. I've sort of come around to the idea of like committing to small chunks of things.
Yep.
So it's a tricky thing. I don't really know. Sometimes I feel like I want the freedom to go wherever I want to go in the future, but that I'm hoping to find a place that makes me want to stay there, if that makes sense.
So getting to the music, your music is distinctly American sounding to me, being an American person. So how did that happen? How did you get drawn to that music, considering your background?
Yeah, well, I am half American, my father's side, but we didn't really listen to bluegrass or Delta blues or any of the older stuff that inspired me. That being said, Americana, American life, American style was always kind of intriguing. It was both like maligned in Europe, but also people were fascinated by it, and a lot of young people especially really loved the appeal of the freedom and whatnot. So when I moved here, I just didn't expect this is where my music career would go either, is the short answer to your question. I wrote indie folk pop rock songs, like just songwriter stuff. And I liked what I was writing, but I sort of discovered slide guitar. And shortly after that, I discovered Delta blues. And then I discovered, that sort of whole like wider decades or a couple of decades around the stuff that was interesting me. So pre-war music in general, and jug bands and clawhammer banjo and string bands and Acadian music and all these cool things. It was all sort of coming together in a way that has very strongly informed my music, which was already I felt like I found my sound when I found slide guitar. So that's kind of where it all started. But I didn't actually listen to old American folk music at the time I wrote my first slide songs. I just thought they sounded badass. I was like, this is cool. And for a whole year, I just was like, oh, I'm going to slide around here, and taught myself how to play until I got into Blind Willie Johnson, and then got a mentor in guitar playing, and it all sort of like came together. But yeah, so it's been a strange sequence of events that somehow resulted in me really liking turn of the century music and the banjo specifically, and then, bluegrass and old time music. So
Yeah, I see you playing the banjo in the video for River Roll. So
that's right.
So maybe you can talk to me a little bit about that song and the video, and what's kind of going on musically and visually.
It's all for us, we give it up. We're gonna fill the lake with iron and rust. Golden shore, there's always more. One day the river had enough.
The song is about the end of the world by no uncertain terms. And I had my feet in a river in Colorado when I wrote it, and I sort of was wondering exactly what I say in the song, what happens when the river has enough, when the world has enough, and we're just not, we've poisoned everything, and we can't put our feet in a river and or enjoy it, or we might not even be here. So just your casual, like, lighthearted hiking stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so, it's about that. And I don't usually write songs. Not that I think the end of the world is political, but it's politicized. So I don't write protest songs or, songs usually that are touching on contemporary issues that face our societies so much. That's just not the style that I've honed in on. But it seemed to me so intricately tied with us in our own lives that it's not a political statement to be like, what's going to happen when the world can't support us anymore, which is just objectively going to happen at some point. So the video was filmed here in Nashville. Oceana filmed all of my videos for this album, and she was really great. I had always wanted to film at these locations, this sort of an abandoned farmhouse and barn in Madison, Tennessee, which is right north of Nashville. So, we went there, and it seemed like a good fit, it's this interesting visual of nature sort of taking back space, right, and being like, I'm going to be here when you're gone, mother effer.
Right.
So that's why I liked that visual there. And we just had fun with it. And, with COVID times, to your point, with everyone being so busy, not every video is something for me. I'm on a small scale budget. Sure. I can't be having 40 people doing a choreographed dance with hair and makeup for every event I do. So it was good to have something that was just a little more pared down, because the song is a little pared down too.
Gotcha. Now maybe you can tell me a little bit about the two folks who worked with you as co-producers on the album, Brooke and Jono. Is it Jano? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, Jono Ricks. Jono is the drummer for the Wood Brothers, and Brooke Sutton is the bass player here in town, who also owns that studio, and they work together a lot. They share the space. So he sort of came with Brooke, who I knew prior and wanted to work with. Brooke had recorded my EP the summer before of solo traditional blues songs. It's called Old Played New, and I just really like Brooke's energy. The studio, being in Nashville is nice, and Jono is an unbelievable percussionist, and the stuff that Brooke did with the Wood Brothers, the One Drop of Truth, that album sort of convinced me to work with Brooke in the first place. So to know that Jono would not only be drumming on it, but would be lending his sort of creative vision was really cool. So I'm really thankful to both of them, because this album came together with them both.
Cool. Touching on a couple more tracks, Little Black Cloud is a very kind of old country bluesy kind of tune. I think I read that you were kind of inspired by or looked to R.L. Burnside as inspiration for that.
Little black cloud, dragging me down, dragging me down, dragging me down. Try to get out, try to get out, try to get out, try to get out, but I don't know how. Got news for you, got news for you, I got news for you. get down to my shoe.
Yeah, and Junior Kimbrough too, I would almost argue, and I got to them by way of Jessie Mae Hemphill. So she's the granddaughter of Sid Hemphill, sort of a hill country virtuoso. The word was not coming to me. And so Jessie Mae's, her music, that sort of like cool cyclical rhythm gets you into this sort of trance-like state with the guitar riff coming over and over. That's very hill country to me. And while Junior and RL have very different styles to Jessie and to each other, they all somewhat have a similar feel, right? With this kind of jangly guitar rhythm over a main riff. Sometimes that's all that's even happening in the song. There's not even chord changes. And it took me a lot longer to tackle that genre because I was already sort of trying to get to the heart of the same question with like Blind Willie Johnson or Skip James or some of the solo slide players, where it was like sometimes it's just one person in their slide and it makes you feel a whole world of emotion. And that's what I find so intriguing about the blues in general. It's not, even with the band stuff or whatever, but the stuff where it's one riff or something or one chord, sometimes I find you have to be so groovy to pull that off. So it was like a little bit of a risk, and I hope it paid off because we had a really good time recording it. We sort of did it differently than all the other tracks where we separated. We still tracked live for pretty much every single track. But on this one, we opened all the doors in the studio, so everything was bleeding together, and we were all like sort of a little bit more of a live feel where the drum room was right there, and we were like, yeah! And it just gave it this I had this crazy amplifier. I don't even remember what I was playing through. And the ending is also in the vein of like the rawness that I really love about Junior's live recording or RL's, where like sometimes they just kind of fall apart at the end. There's not a clear ending, and that happened naturally with this recording. So we kept that ending, and it was really, really fun.
So I get the feeling that you do quite a bit of research, digging up information and around, because some of these folks that you've mentioned have been gone for decades, if not longer. What is your process? How do you find these folks, and how do you connect with them?
Well, they found me, and I guess it's just really a matter of what appealed to me and what spoke to me, because I do a deep dive into those things, and not always everything, but the Skip James and Blind Willie Johnson really piqued my interest, and I got to them through Rory Block and Led Zeppelin. And and sort of I just found, I grew up a rock kid, so I had heard a lot of the history of the punk movement, of classic rock bands that I loved, of indie rock scene in England and the indie rock scene in New York, and like sort of even metal and Metallica and all the history of that. But like hearing the history of blues, which backed so much of the music that I loved, things that I would never have imagined, blues sensibilities just seep into everything from Motorhead to Aerosmith. It's like, it's so amazing to me. And then to down to like a very physical way where you see, a lot of white rock and rollers not crediting old blues players properly and stealing traditional songs and claiming them as their own. So a part of me just, I don't know, I wanted to learn about the actual beginning, I guess, or what felt like the beginning to me. But it wasn't really like I abstractly approached it and was like, I want to learn about the Delta blues. It was because the music was so fascinating, and I was like, who is Blind Willie Johnson? Like, what are all these things? Who's Charlie Patton? What is the Delta? What does that look like? And it's been like almost a scholarly mission, but without me realizing it, moving to the South was to get closer to all of those things. It was to understand better in old time banjo music what a holler is, like how people live, what a banty rooster is, all the railroad lines that used to run through these places. It's kind of just devotion to the craft, I guess.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you were kind of on the road recently, going through series of gigs, and then you're kind of back at it again in a week or so. So what are live shows like? Are you playing with a full band? Are you doing solo? How does it work?
I'm still doing both. We are starting to get on the road with the band this year, which is no small endeavor. So there are other runs where it just makes sense to go solo, and I've spent pretty much my whole life performing solo, so I do enjoy doing that. But I really love bringing my trio out on the road with me and putting on sort of like the bigger, more rocked out shows, because that's what we like to do.
What kind of folks come out to see you?
All kinds, really all kinds. Funny variety. It just depends where we are too. You know, if it's a hippie town, a bunch of hippies are out. If it's
Right.
like more of a retiree town, it's going to be a lot of older folks, and it just really depends.
I see. It's interesting you use the term hippie. It's been bandied about quite a bit in folks I've been talking to lately. And I'm an old guy. I have my own vision of what a hippie is. It's from the 60s, obviously. But
Yeah.
is it taking on a new meaning, or is it kind of going back to what it was originally? I'm just curious.
Oh, I don't know, because I don't really know if the way we use it is the same as what maybe you meant when you said it about hippies in the 60s, because that was a very
Right.
specific and loaded political time. So it doesn't have that derogatory connotation, really. It's just sort of a fact of like someone who is a little bit more progressive usually.
Yeah. Now, speaking of times and political, I mean, a lot of stuff is going on in the States, all the shootings and stuff. That's all over the news everywhere, including down here. And I believe our prime minister is in New York City at the moment. So there's a lot of curiosity about what's going on in the States at the moment and whether anything is going to change. Do you have any opinions about that? Thoughts?
I have a lot of opinions. I grew up in Europe where we don't have guns. I firmly believe that when you choose to go live somewhere, you also choose to accept the societal norms of that society. So I don't
Right.
actually like, and also understanding how very different life is in a country that's much larger and in some places still very almost primal in terms
Right.
of the wildlife, in terms of self-defense, in terms of defending your property and your cattle. I have heard very valid reasons why people use guns in this country, but you know, my childhood, my raising, the way I look at the world, I just wish there were other ways, or ways to put guns in only those people's hands that need them out in nature, and not in inner cities, not in places that are crowded. So I don't really have a good answer. I just don't like guns, and
Right.
I wish they were a little bit more discerning with whose hands they end up in. But with a country this big, it's really hard to do that, especially when people have very valid reasons to be, using guns. It's
Sure.
hard to
Yep.
tell someone yes or no. So I don't know. I'm going to let smarter people than me figure out, hopefully, better gun control, because my opinion is that shit is fucking horrible. It's
Yep. Absolutely.
absolutely abhorrent what happened. And so I hope somebody finds a good way to kind of regulate stuff.
Right. So you're heading back out on the road in June, and are you thinking ahead further, thinking about what you're going to do musically next, anything like that?
Yeah, not really. I'm barely recovering from just getting this one out, and it seems like I have the loftiest of aspirations when I think of some of my, heroes growing up putting out 3 records a year, and it's sort of
Right.
like I need probably a good year and a half. I don't know if I will be able to swing another full album by next album cycle. But maybe I can. If I start writing, it's just the writing part that like can fall to the wayside when I'm on the road, because it's just
Right.
sometimes hard to sit down and spend that time. So if you don't have new songs, then you don't have a new album coming out. So a lot of touring on the horizon. Might be a year or so of that, and then another album.
Yeah. Well, come on down here if you ever get the chance. We'd love to.
Oh, I'd
love
love
to have you.
to. That would be awesome.
Yep. All righty. Well, thank you for very, very much for talking with me today, and
Yeah,
good
thank
luck
you,
with
Marty.
everything. And we'll look
Thanks
forward
for
to
having
seeing
me.
what you come up with next. Yep. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Bye.